The emergency beacon screamed through the darkness of space, its desperate signal reaching the massive crystal towers of the Galactic Confederation headquarters. Ambassador Veltar pressed his four-fingered hand against the communication device, his insect-like eyes reflecting the flashing red warning lights that filled the council chamber. "This is Cathara Prime calling for immediate help." The voice crackled through the speakers, filled with terror and desperation. "We are under massive attack. 3 of our worlds have already fallen. The Zephyrians are killing everyone. Please, we need military help right now." The message repeated again and again, time growing weaker as the transmission struggled to reach across the vast distances of space. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 43 different alien species sat in stunned silence, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of worry, fear, and confusion. General Dexim, a tall being covered in smooth blue skin, stood up from his seat. His voice, normally steady and confident, now shook with barely controlled panic. "Our 4th fleet was completely destroyed in just 6 hours," he announced to the chamber. "The Zephyrians fight like nothing we have ever seen before. Not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They simply kill everything in their path." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some representatives clicked their claws nervously, others hummed in distress, and a few simply sat in shocked silence. Had been a minor threat for decades, occasionally raiding border worlds and stealing supplies. But this was different. This was total war. Counselor Meridian, whose crystal body sparkled with internal light, rose gracefully from her position. "Our peacekeeping forces are not designed for this kind of brutality," she said, her voice ringing like musical chimes. "We have never faced an enemy that fights with such complete violence. What choices do we have left?" The question hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Everyone in the chamber knew what she was really asking, but nobody wanted to speak words out loud. The Galactic Confederation had always prided itself on peaceful solutions. Diplomatic negotiations and civilized warfare that followed strict rules about protecting civilians and infrastructure. Elder Quinrose, the oldest member of the council, slowly lifted his ancient head. His species had lived for thousands of years, and his wisdom was respected throughout the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "Article 847, he said simply. The chamber fell into complete silence. Even the emergency beacon seemed too quiet, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Article 847 was the emergency deployment of Restricted Species Protocol, a law that had been written into the Confederation Charter, but never used in over 1,000 years of galactic peace. It meant asking for help from the humans of Earth. Counselor Zactrin, whose tentacles writhed with agitation, immediately stood up in protest. "The humans are barely contained in their own solar system," he said, his voice filled with fear and disgust. "They fight wars against their own kind over pieces of land, over resources, over ideas. They create weapons designed to kill millions of their own people. They are predators, born on a death world that tried to kill them every single day. Which is exactly why we need them," Elder Quinrose replied calmly. "The Zephyrians have shown us that sometimes, to fight true monsters, you need to call upon monsters of your own." The debate that followed was fierce and desperate. Some representatives argued that humanity was too dangerous to unleash upon the galaxy, that their capacity for violence was too great to control. Others pointed out that the Zephyrians were already committing genocide, and that the Confederation's peaceful methods had failed completely. Reports continued to arrive from the Cathara system, each one more desperate than the last. Entire cities were being harvested for biological material. Civilian populations were being processed through Zephyrian biofactories. Children were being used as raw materials for alien weapons. The vote was called after 3 hours of desperate debate. Representatives cast their decisions with heavy hearts, knowing that they were about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. 22 voted in favor of invoking Article 847. 21 voted against. By a single vote, the Galactic Confederation had decided to request military aid from humanity. Ambassador Veltar was chosen for the mission, because his species had the most experience dealing with predatory life forms. As his ship prepared for the journey to the Sol system, he reviewed the classified files about human military capabilities that had been gathered over centuries of careful observation. The reports were terrifying. Humans had turned warfare into a science, developing weapons that could destroy entire planets and tactics that seemed to come from the minds of devils. They fought with a creativity and brutality that no other species could match. They had poisoned their own air and water in pursuit of military advantages. They had built weapons that could end all life on their planet. They had pointed these weapons at themselves. But as another distress signal arrived from Cathara, this one so weak it could barely be heard, Veltar realized they had no other choice. The peaceful species of the galaxy had created a civilization based on cooperation and understanding. They had no idea how to fight a war of extinction. The humans did. They had been fighting such wars for their entire existence, and they had become very good at it. Now the galaxy would learn what happened when you asked the monsters for help. The massive doors of Luna Station's command center slid open with a soft hiss, revealing Ambassador Veltar as he stepped carefully into the room. His insect-like appearance drew brief glances from the human officers, but they quickly returned to their work with professional discipline. Admiral Kim Dae-ho stood at the center of the chamber, his weathered face studying the holographic star charts that floated above the main table. "Welcome to Luna Station, Ambassador," Dae-ho said, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in the Earth Defense Force. "I understand you have a problem that requires our particular skills." Veltar's compound eyes scanned the room, taking in the displays of human military technology that lined the walls. Weapon systems, tactical computers, and strategic maps showed a level of military preparation that made his skin crawl. These humans lived and breathed warfare in a way that no other species in the galaxy could understand. "The Zephyrians have invaded the Cathara system," Veltar explained, his voice trembling slightly. "They are not simply conquering territory. They're systematically destroying every living thing they encounter. Our entire military force was defeated in ours." Lieutenant Colonel Park Min-ho, a younger officer with sharp eyes and quick movements, leaned forward with interest. "How many ships did your Confederation send against them?" 200 vessels, including our most advanced battleships," Veltar replied. "And they were all destroyed?" asked Captain Lee So-young from the intelligence section, her fingers already working on a data pad. "Not destroyed," Veltar corrected grimly. "Harvested. The Zephyrians turned our own ships into biological weapons and used them against us." The human officers exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Admiral Dae-ho walked around the holographic display, studying the tactical information that Veltar had provided. His expression grew more serious with each detail. "These Zephyrians," Dae-ho said slowly, "they fight using total war tactics. No prisoners, no mercy, complete destruction of enemy capabilities." "Yes," Veltar confirmed. "It is barbaric and uncivilized. We have never encountered anything like it." Major Choi Ho-yanwoo, the tactical specialist, looked up from his analysis. With a grim smile, "Actually, Ambassador, what you're describing is standard military doctrine. The Zephyrians are fighting a conventional war. Your Confederation just never learned how to fight back." The alien ambassador's antennae twitched with confusion and fear. "But surely there must be rules, agreements about protecting civilians and limiting destruction." "In war, there is only one rule," Captain Lee replied matter-of-factly. "Win or die. Everything else is just political decoration." As the briefing continued, Veltar began to understand why the Galactic Confederation had been so reluctant to contact Earth. These humans discussed violence and destruction with the same casual tone that his people use to talk about farming or trade negotiations. They had weapons that could crack planets, tactics that seemed designed by devils, and a complete willingness to use both. "We will deploy the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet," Admiral Dae-ho announced after reviewing the tactical data. "Full combat authorization under Article 847 protocols." "How many ships will you send?" Veltar asked hopefully. 47 vessels, Dae-ho replied. 3 dreadnoughts, 15 heavy cruisers, and supporting units. Plus the 12th Marine Division for ground operations. Veltar's compound eyes widened in shock. Only 47 ships? But the Confederation sent 200, and they were all destroyed. Numbers don't win wars, Ambassador, interrupted Commander Yunji-hai, who had been quietly studying the enemy tactical patterns. Strategy wins wars. Tactics win battles. And the will to do whatever is necessary wins everything. The human. Officers continued their planning with an efficiency that amazed and terrified their alien observer. They identified weaknesses in Zephyrian tactics that the Confederation had never noticed. They developed countermeasures for biological weapons. That seemed impossible to defeat. They planned attacks that would have horrified any civilized species. The Zephyrians use hive mind coordination, observed Major Choi, as he manipulated the tactical display. That's their strength, but it's also their weakness. Disrupt their communications, and their entire force becomes confused. They're biological. Ships are impressive, added Captain Lee, but they're still bound by the same physical laws as any other vessel. Kinetic weapons at sufficient velocity will penetrate any armor. Within hours, the human fleet was preparing for departure. Veltar watched from an observation deck as Marines loaded equipment that seemed designed for maximum destruction rather than peacekeeping. Weapons that could melt through solid rock, armor that could withstand radiation that would kill most, species and supplies for operations in environments that would be uninhabitable for anyone else. Are you certain this will work? Veltar asked Admiral Deho as they stood watching the final preparations. No, Deho replied honestly. But we're very good at adapting to new situations. It's a survival trait that our world taught us. The fleet entered hyperspace. Veltar found himself questioning whether the Confederation had made the right choice. The humans were certainly capable of defeating the Zephyrians, but what would happen afterward? These Deathworlders had the power to reshape the galaxy, according to their will. But then, another distress signal arrived from Cathara. Weaker than before, and Veltar realized that sometimes you had to trust monsters to fight monsters. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when Earth's children went to war. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Cathara system, and the sight that greeted them was like something from a nightmare. 3 beautiful worlds that had once been home to millions of peaceful beings were now covered in massive hive structures that pulsed with alien life. The Zephyrian ships moved through space like living creatures, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with a wet, volcanic sheen that made even the hardened human officers feel uneasy. Commander Yoon Ji-hai stood on the bridge of the destroyer Seoul, watching the enemy fleet through the main view screen. The Zephyrians had 17 enormous hive ships, each one the size of a small moon, surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels that darted through space like angry insects. Tactical report, Admiral Kim Dae-ho's voice crackled through the communications. System from the flagship. 17 primary targets, approximately 300 support vessels, reported Lieutenant Sung Min-jae from his position at the sensor station. They have established ground operations on all 3 planets. Enemy strength estimated at over 2 million combat units. Ambassador Veltar, who was observing from the diplomatic section of the bridge, felt his legs go weak. This is much worse than our intelligence reports suggested. Perhaps we should wait for additional support from the Confederation? No, Admiral Deho replied firmly over the comm. We work with what we have. All units, prepare for Operation Deathworld. The human fleet began to move, but not in the way that Veltar expected. Instead of forming a massive battle line like the Confederation forces had done, the ships scattered in different directions. Breaking into small groups that seemed to move with their own purpose, Captain Park Sun-ho commanded the destroyer Incheon as it raced toward the nearest Zephyrian hive ship. His crew worked with practiced efficiency, their movements smooth and coordinated despite the desperate nature of their mission. Enemy vessel at bearing 270 reported his weapons. Officer, range closing to optimal firing distance. Load kinetic penetrators, Park ordered. Target their communication arrays. Zephyrians had never faced weapons like the ones the humans carried. Their bioarmor was designed to absorb energy weapons and deflect conventional projectiles. But the human kinetic rounds traveled at incredible speeds, punching through their hulls like needles through soft flesh. Direct hit, announced the weapons officer as the enemy ship shuddered from the impact. Their coordination systems are down. All across the system, similar scenes played out as human ships struck at targets that the Zephyrians had never thought to defend. Communication relays, supply lines, breeding chambers, and command centers all came under attack from enemies who seemed to understand warfare in ways that the hive mind could not comprehend. On the surface of Cathara Prime, Colonel Baisujin led her marines through terrain that would have killed most other species. The atmosphere was thick with toxic gases that the Zephyrians had released. The temperature was hot enough to melt metal, and radiation levels were lethal to most forms of life. "Just another day on Earth," muttered Sergeant Kim Wan-young as his squad advanced through the poisonous fog. Their environmental suits were designed for the worst conditions that humanity's death world could produce, making them perfectly suited for the nightmare that Cathara had become. The Zephyrians had never encountered enemies who could function in such conditions. Their warriors were built for overwhelming force and coordinated attacks, not for the guerrilla warfare that the humans brought to every engagement. Enemy patrol, 50 meters ahead, reported Corporal Lee Taman through the squad communication system. "Standard ambush formation," Colonel Bay ordered. "Remember, these bugs have never faced predators before. Use that advantage." The Marines moved like shadows through the toxic landscape, positioning themselves for maximum surprise. When the Zephyrian patrol passed their position, the humans struck with deadly precision, eliminating the entire enemy unit before they could send a warning signal. Major Lim Sub and Special Forces team had infiltrated one of the primary hive structures, moving through maintenance tunnels that were too small for the Zephyrian warriors to follow. Their mission was to plant explosives in the Neuro Control Center that coordinated the local ground forces. "Charges are set," she reported through her encrypted communication device. This should cause some serious confusion in their command structure. Explosion that followed sent shockwaves through the entire hive complex. Thousands of Zephyrian warriors who had been operating with perfect coordination suddenly found themselves confused and disoriented. Unable to receive orders from their central command, back in space, the naval battle continued with increasing intensity. The human ships used tactics that seemed impossible to their alien observers. Making sudden changes in direction and speed that should have torn their hulls apart, they fought at ranges that put them in constant danger, but their aggressive approach allowed them to exploit weaknesses in the Zephyrian formations. "They're beginning to retreat from Sector 7, Commander Yoon observed as she watched the tactical display. "First time we've seen the Zephyrians show any kind of tactical withdrawal." Admiral Deho nodded with grim satisfaction. "They're learning that Earth's children don't just fight to survive, we fight to win, no matter what it costs." The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the invasion began, the Zephyrians were being forced to give ground. The humans had brought something to the conflict that the peaceful species of the galaxy had never possessed: the absolute determination to do whatever was necessary to protect the innocent. The war had been going on for 3 weeks when Colonel Lee Dong-ho received the most dangerous mission of his career. Intelligence reports showed that the main Zephyrian command center was located deep underground on Cathara Prime, buried beneath kilometers of biomechanical tunnels and defended by thousands of enemy warriors. "Your job is simple," Admiral Kim Dae-ho explained during the briefing. "Get into that hive, destroy their primary command brain, and get out alive. Easy." Colonel Lee looked at the tactical display showing the massive underground complex. "How many hostiles are we talking about, sir?" "Approximately 3,000 between you and the target," replied Captain Jung Minna from Intelligence. "But remember, these bugs have never faced human infantry tactics before." Lee's assault team consisted of 20 Marines, each one trained for the worst conditions that warfare could produce. Sergeant Cho Young-mi checked her weapons one final time as the transport ship approached the drop zone. Its standard room clearing. "Procedures," Lee announced to his team. "These aliens fight like a hive mind, but we fight like humans. That means we can think, adapt, and improvise better than they can." Above the planet's surface, the space battle had reached a critical point. The Zephyrians had learned to counter some of the human tactics, but the humans kept changing their approach faster than the hive mind could adapt. Captain Han So-young commanded the heavy cruiser Busan as it engaged 3 enemy bioships at the same time. Her crew worked with deadly efficiency, targeting the neural clusters that controlled each vessel's biological systems. "Direct hit on the lead ship," reported her weapons officer. "Their coordination is breaking down." "Good," Han replied. "Now target their breeding chambers. Let's make sure they can't replace what we're destroying." The human strategy was becoming clear to their alien observers. Instead of trying to match the Zephyrians' overwhelming numbers, they were systematically destroying the enemy's ability to fight as a coordinated force. Every destroyed command center, every severed communication link, every damaged breeding facility weakened the entire hive, deep underground. Colonel Lee's team had penetrated the outer defenses of the primary hive. The tunnels were filled with a thick, organic atmosphere that would have poisoned most species, but the human environmental suits kept them alive and fighting. "Motion sensors detect massive movement ahead," reported Corporal Kim Taeyong. "They know we're here, and we go in fast and hard," Lee decided. No time for subtlety. The Marines moved through the alien corridors with practiced precision. Unlike the Confederation forces, who had tried to fight the Zephyrians using traditional military formations, the humans used small unit tactics that confused the hive mind. They split up, rejoined, flanked, and ambushed in ways that the enemy had never encountered. "They're trying to surround us," observed Sergeant Cho, as enemy warriors poured out of side passages. "Let them," Lee replied grimly. "We'll show them." What happens when you corner a predator? The battle that followed was brutal and desperate. The Zephyrians had superior numbers and natural weapons. But the humans had something that no other species in the galaxy possessed: the ability to fight. As individuals while still working as a team, back in space. Admiral Daeho watched the tactical display with growing concern. The Zephyrians were pulling back their forces, consolidating around their massive mothership that hung in orbit like a dark moon. "They're preparing for something big," observed Commander Park Jin-ho. "All their remaining ships are forming a defensive shell around the mothership. Then we better finish this before they can launch whatever they're planning," Daeho decided. "All units prepare for final assault." The human fleet moved toward the enemy mothership with determination that impressed even their alien allies. The Zephyrian vessel was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the biggest human dreadnought, covered with weapons that could destroy entire cities. Meanwhile, deep in the underground hive, Colonel Lee's team had finally reached the command center. The chamber was a nightmare of biological technology, the massive brain-like structure that pulsed with alien intelligence. Neural cables connected it to communication systems that coordinated the entire invasion fleet. "Placing charges now," reported Corporal Kim as he attached explosive devices to the central neural cluster. "This should give their whole network a serious headache." "Timer set for 30 seconds, Lee announced. "Everyone out, now." The team ran through the collapsing tunnels as the explosives detonated behind them. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the entire system, Zephyrian ships began to operate erratically, their perfect coordination shattered by the destruction of a primary command node. "Enemy formations are breaking up," reported Captain Lee from the flagship. "They're losing coordination on all fronts." But the Zephyrians weren't finished yet. The mothership began to glow with an ominous energy, and massive weapons systems emerged from its biomechanical hull. It was clear that the enemy was preparing for one final, desperate attack. "They're going to try to destroy the entire system." Rather than lose it, realized Commander Yoon as she studied the energy readings. Admiral Daeho nodded grimly. "Then we stop them. All units, full attack on the mothership. Show them what happens when you threaten innocent people." The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of 3 worlds hung in the balance. The Zephyrian mothership filled the space around Cathara Prime like a living nightmare. Its massive biomechanical surface writhed with weapon systems that could destroy entire fleets, and its internal chambers housed nearly 500,000 enemy warriors. No force in galactic history had ever successfully attacked such a fortress. Admiral Kim Dae-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the enormous enemy vessel with the cold focus of a hunter. His officers worked quietly around him, preparing weapons and tactics that would either save 3 worlds or result in humanity's most spectacular failure. "All units report ready for final assault," announced Captain Jung Mina from the communications station. Ambassador Veltar, who had watched the humans fight for weeks, still could not understand their methods. "Admiral, why not use your nuclear weapons? Surely that would be more efficient than a direct attack." Commander O'Hygen smiled grimly. "Because, Ambassador, we're not here to destroy everything. We're here to save people. Besides, where would be the challenge in just blowing things up?" The human fleet moved into attack formation with precision that still amazed their alien observers. But instead of the massive frontal assault that military logic suggested, they began something that looked completely insane. Phase 1. Execute. Admiral Deho ordered. Captain Na Sung-ho's destroyer group launched the first attack, concentrating their fire on the mothership's sensor arrays. The enemy responded with overwhelming firepower that should have destroyed the small human ships instantly. But the destroyers scattered like leaves in a storm, their incredible speed and maneuverability allowing them to dodge weapons that could crack planets. Sensors confirmed temporary disruption of their targeting systems, reported Lieutenant Anruwan from the tactical station. Phase 2. Major Ruhewan's fighter squadrons swarmed over the mothership's surface like angry insects. Their small size allowed them to fly between the massive biomechanical structures, avoiding the larger weapons while attacking the neural conduits that connected different sections of the ship. "It's like performing surgery with a plasma torch," muttered Squadron Leader Kim Subin as she guided her fighter through a canyon of alien flesh and metal. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that fought with such precision and creativity. Their hive mind was designed for overwhelming force and coordinated attacks, but it struggled to adapt to human tactics that seemed to change with every moment. "They're trying to seal the damaged areas," observed Commander Yoon as she watched the enemy ship's surface writhe and shift, "but they can't coordinate repairs while under constant attack." Phase 3, Admiral Deho announced. This was the moment that would determine the fate of the battle. Colonel Im Soo-kyung's Marines loaded into heavily armored assault shuttles, launched directly at the mothership's main hangar bay. It was a suicide mission by any reasonable standard. But humans had never been particularly reasonable. Breaching the outer defenses, reported Colonel Im as her shuttle smashed through biomechanical barriers, meeting heavy resistance, but were pushing forward. Inside the mothership, the Marines demonstrated exactly why humans were called Deathworlders. The environment was filled with toxic gases that would kill most species instantly, temperatures that could melt steel, and gravitational fields that changed without warning. But the humans kept fighting, adapting to each new challenge, as if they had been born for this kind of warfare. They'd keep changing their tactics. Observed Sergeant Yang Yun-soo as her squad cleared another corridor filled with enemy warriors. "But they've never faced anything like us before." The final phase began when the Marines reached the mothership's neural core. Unlike the smaller command centers they had destroyed before, this was the primary brain of the entire Zephyrian fleet. It was a massive biomechanical entity that pulsed with alien intelligence, coordinating the genocide of 3 entire species. "Charges are set," reported Corporal Moon Jae-sung as he attached the final explosive device. "This is going to be the biggest explosion we've ever made. All units, clear the area," Colonel M ordered. "We're about to give these bugs the worst headache." In galactic history, the explosion that followed was visible from the other side of the system. The mothership's neural core erupted in a cascade of bioelectrical energy. It spread through every Zephyrian vessel in the fleet. Without their central coordination, the invading ships began to turn on each other, their biological programming failing in catastrophic ways. "All enemy vessels are either destroyed or retreating," reported Captain Lee from the tactical station. "The system is secure." As the human fleet regrouped, Ambassador Veltar approached Admiral Deho with something that resembled both gratitude and fear. "Your species fought with such intensity, such creativity. I am beginning to understand why the Confederation was so concerned about contacting Earth." Admiral Deho nodded seriously. "You don't fight for conquest or glory, Ambassador. You fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. But you should never forget that we are very, very good at what we do." The victory celebration was brief and somber. The humans had accomplished what the entire Galactic Confederation could not, but the cost had been high. 3 ships lost, over 200 casualties. the uncomfortable knowledge that humanity had once again proven its capacity for violence. As the fleet prepared to return to Earth, Admiral Deho received a message from the Confederation Council. It contained formal thanks for human assistance, recognition of their valor, and a subtle reminder that Article 847 would be carefully revised to ensure such deployments remained extremely rare. The galaxy had been saved, but at the cost of revealing just how dangerous Earth's children could be when properly motivated.